Hi, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today we're going to be painting Mount Greylock at dusk. I'm going to be sipping a little Pinot Grigio. So let's get painted and let's get sipping. Alright, so for today the materials we'll be using is a 16 by 20 stretched prime canvas that you can get at any of your local craft stores. You can certainly change up the size, but I'm going to be using a 16 by 20. My palette, I just use this disposable food tray foam that I can toss when I'm done. I'm using titanium white, ultramarine blue, fluorescent orange, deep yellow, Mars black, and green oxide. These are acrylic paints. You can certainly change up the colors a little bit if you'd like to. I have a water cup for washing my brushes. I have a paper towel for drying my brushes. And the two brushes I'm going to be using today is a 1-inch flat bristle brush and a number 1 round brush. You could use like a number 1 or number 2. I'm using a number 1. And that's all you're going to need today. Alright, so the first step that we're going to be doing is the sky. I'm going to be using my bristle brush, and the sky is going to come about halfway down your canvas. I'm going to be starting with blue and white on my brush at the same time. I will not be washing my brush throughout this process. I like to just kind of use the dirty brush as it goes through my canvas, and I like to paint the edges of my canvas, so that's why I just kind of started up at the top there. As I come down my sky, I'm not going to be picking up any more blue because I want this sky to go lighter and lighter as it comes down my canvas. And I also want to kind of get the majority of that blue off of my brush before I start using those sunset colors. So if you do have any adjusting that you want to do to your blue up here, do it now before you get down into your sunset, because you won't want to be readjusting up here once you have your sunset colors on there. So again, I'm just kind of adjusting my blue the way that I want it. Now I'm just picking up white, and my sky is going to get lighter and lighter as it comes down the canvas. And I'm going to come down about, like I said, about halfway down my canvas. The majority of this is going to be white at this point. I will start using those sunset colors in just a minute here. I just want to make sure I've got this blue the way that I want it. Once I come down and have a good lighter area in the center, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to pick up my sunset colors, and I'm going to start with the orange. And the reason why I'm starting with the orange is so I don't run the risk of having a green sky, because I do still have a little bit of blue on my brush from the first part of this step. And if I still had blue on my brush and I went right into that yellow, I'd end up with a green sky, because blue and yellow makes green. So now I just picked up some of that yellow, and I'm coming over onto the right hand side, and you can see I'm kind of preserving that center area for the lighter part of the sun that I want to, or the lighter part of the sky that I want to have. I just added white to my brush also, so this way I'm going to kind of go up into my the other area of my sky so I can get it to blend nicely. I just put a little bit more white on my brush, and now I'm just kind of going left to right, getting all of these colors to intermingle with each other so they look like they belong together in this sky. And if I want, I could certainly tweak this over here. If it was too pink, I could certainly add a little bit of yellow right on top of it. And once I feel like I've got a really nice blend going, which I do, I'm pretty happy with this, I'm going to add, without washing my brush, I'm going to add some blue down at the bottom. And what's going to happen, I'm adding it right on top of my sunset. What's going to happen is this is providing me with those low-lying, like misty kind of clouds that happen in a sunset, and it will also provide me a great place to put the setting sun, and it will allow that sun to really pop right out of the canvas. So I added some blue on top of my wet sunset, And you know, it might turn a little on the greener side when you get over onto this yellow side, but that's all right, because that's, you know, what the sky does. And if you go up a little bit, you can get a couple of these little clouds to just, you know, lay nice and gently in that sky. And then once you feel like you've got that nice and blended, and I'm just using like a feather touch, because these bristle brushes sometimes will get a little scratchy on your canvas. So if you just use a nice light feather touch, whoops, sorry about that, you can definitely get them to blend in really nicely. And then once you feel like you're all set, we will be using this big brush for the next step, but we also need the small brush too. So you're going to wash and dry the big brush, and you also get that small brush ready for the next step. All right, so for the next step, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing the mountain range, and we're going to be using a custom blue that we're going to make. So in order to make the custom blue, I'm going to use my small brush to create these colors. I'm going to use the remaining amount of my ultramarine blue. I'm going to add a little bit of white, just kind of scoop it in there, and a little bit of black, and then I'm just going to start to spin these colors around. What I'm going for is like a dusty kind of country blue. I really just want to take that vibrancy out of the ultramarine blue, so that's why I added a little bit of white and blue. So you're in essence adding gray to the blue, which is going to give it a really nice, smoky, off in the distance kind of mountain look. If you were to look at a real landscape and it has mountain ranges in it, the farther away you go, or the farther away the mountains go, you'll notice that they have like a bluish tinge to them, or purple. So that's why we're going to be doing these back mountains with blue. I think I want mine to be a little bit grayer, so I'm adding just a touch more white to it and a little bit more black. I just don't like it to be super bright, so that's why I'm adding just a little bit more of those colors. And you can really adjust this color to be whatever you visually like it to be. It will dry a little bit darker than it is when it's wet. So just know that whatever it looks like when it's wet, it's going to dry just a little bit darker. And I'm pretty happy with that color. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to put my small brush away in my water cup, and I'm just going to grab my bristle brush here. So this mountain range that we're doing is an actual place in the Berkshire County or Berkshire Hills of Massachusetts. So I know that there is an identifying little set of hills in through here, but you don't necessarily have to do exactly as the same exact bumps and stuff as I am, but I know that there's a couple of defining ones in through here. So I'm going to just kind of incorporate those into my painting, because the name of this painting is Mount Greylock at Dusk. So I want to make sure that I am incorporating the correct hills for my purposes. And then as you go along here, you just can kind of roll these hills through your sky. You do want this color to be different than your sky color. So if it looks too similar, then you might want to just adjust it a little bit more. And then once I get the outline of it going, what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of making sure I've got it nice and filled in. I'm going to come down about 2 or 3 inches and just make this line in through here, and I'm going to color this entire area in with that custom blue that I made. And again, I'm kind of wrapping it around my sides. You can do this in circles or dots or long like X's like I'm doing, left to right. I am using a good amount of paint, so that way it really fills in nicely. I know that again, with these bristle brushes, you might end up with these little scratch marks. So by using a good amount of paint, I can just kind of lay the paint on there and it will fill those little scratch marks in. And once you get it nice and filled in, if you want to, you can add these little highlights to the tops of the mountains. And what I did is I just added a little bit of white to my brush. And you can just ever so gently add a little bit of white. You don't necessarily need to make it look like there's snow on the top of them, but you can certainly just lighten that up just a little bit, and you can really have some fun with this. I'm just kind of like dotting it in through here just to kind of give it a little bit more personality. You can have some some darker ones too. If you wanted, you could certainly add a little bit of black in through there to get it to be a little bit darker. So that is definitely something that is a visual preference, and you can make it look whatever way you want. So as I'm finishing up here, we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. You'll be using the bristle brush, but you will want to wash it and dry it yet again. So again, once you're all set, getting these mountains to look as vibrant or as subtle as you want them to look, you can wash and dry the big brush and then just get ready for the next step. All right, so this next step is probably the easiest step of all time. You are gonna take your large bristle brush and you're going to paint this entire bottom section in black. There's no special brush stroke, there's no special technique, there is no special quantity of paint. You just really want to make sure that you have the entire area covered. And when you're getting to where it meets the mountains, don't even worry about that being perfect, because we really want them to look like they belong together. So you could almost just kind of blend them in together, because your blue is probably going to be still a little wet. So don't worry if they merge together, because that's going to be all right. You're going to have a lot of big trees that are going to be coming in front of them. So the line that you have there really doesn't need to be anything super perfect. And just make sure, as you can hear, I'm hitting my easel here. Make sure that you get all the way down to the bottom of your canvas. And if you were wrapping around the sides, don't forget those sides. You could certainly wait until later to get the bottom part, the bottom edge of your canvas, because if you do it right now, it will probably stick to your easel. So you'll want to either wait or do it now and then just let it dry before you put it back on your easel. And then the next step that we're going to be doing after this, we will be using that small brush. So when you get done filling this entire area in, you're going to take your big brush, put it away in your water cup, and then you can take out your small brush and wash it and dry it and get ready for the next step. All right, so for the next step, I'm going to be using my small round brush. I'm going to be using black paint only, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm making my tree trunks in essence, but for me I'm going to call them markers as to where I want my trees, because I don't necessarily want them to be the only thing that I do to the tree trunk. So for me, I'm just kind of giving myself a roadmap where my trees are going to be. I'm using black paint only, and I have taller trees over on the outsides of my canvas, and then as it's coming towards the inside, I have shorter ones. I do know that I'm going to have my sun somewhere in through there, so as I come in through the center area, I'm doing just these smaller little pointy ones. These are going to resemble the tops of pine trees, because we're in essence looking down into this forest, this pine forest. So we're going to have these little tiny tree tops off in the distance. As I come over here, maybe I do a couple of taller ones. I like my trees to be of varying heights, so you'll notice I've got them kind of all staggered in different heights and through here. You don't necessarily want these big ones too close together, because you're going to be adding all kinds of branches and stuff, and you do want to be able to see some of this those mountains through the background, so I don't have them too close. Again, this is just kind of like my markers for where I want those trees to be. And then when you're all set with this step, you're going to take out that large brush once again. So you can put your small brush away and take out your large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so the next step is going to be with the bristle brush, black paint, and I'm going to be doing the branches to my trees. So these are meant to look like pine trees. So I want my pine branches to have little pine needles on them, which is why I'm using this bristle brush. Sometimes these bristle brushes can get a little out of control. So to keep them in control, my tip is to take your brush and put a good amount of paint on it and squish it on the side of your palette. That's going to bring these bristles back together for you, and you can do that as frequently as you want. I want these to look like summer pine trees, so my branches are going to predominantly go up, but if you wanted these to look like winter trees, you could put your branches down. I want to maintain the points at the tops of these trees, so I never want to have a really wide top to the tree. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be dabbing or dotting, maintaining the top of that tree, and I'm using either the corner or the side of this bristle brush, and that's going to allow me to have these really kind of fluffy branches and get them to look like they've got little pine needles coming off of them. You don't want them to all go in the same exact direction. You want some of them to maybe come down a little bit, some of them to go up. You want to kind of fill in that trunk area so the trunk doesn't look, so you don't have that visible line. And pine trees are going to predominantly get wider as they get down towards that bottom. So when you get down towards that bottom, you want to fill this in even more, and you want these to be the length of them a little bit wider than they are at the top. But again, I still want to see some of that, those mountains through the background, so I'm not going to fill mine in 100%, but I do definitely want to disguise this separation line between my trees and my mountains. So when I get down there, I will be filling it in a little bit more and trying to disguise that that line that is separating those mountains from the pine tree forest. And again, as I get down towards the bottom here, I will be filling it in a little bit more, and I'm going to be, as we get towards that center region, I will be kind of maintaining some of those tiny little points that I have in through there, because those, like I mentioned earlier, are meant to look like the tippy tops of these kind of trees, only maybe farther off in the distance. So that's why I'm going to leave some of those. I'm just continuing to dab and turn my brush as I need to, and I'm going to fill this in a little bit more in through here. And then as I come down towards this bottom part, maybe you leave some of the tree tops as just those little tiny lines. But when you get towards the smaller ones, you know, the details, like those branch details, are less important. You can just kind of take your brush and dab along here, leaving a couple of those little tree tops poking out. And when I get to maybe these two, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so you can see the technique that I'm using on these branches. And then that way, you know, if you need that close-up little view as to how I'm getting these branches, we've got that in there. So here's where I'm going to start to zoom in right on this little branch here, so you can see I'm just kind of dotting with the corner of my brush, give myself a thick trunk there, and then I'm just really kind of using the side of my brush to get these little branches coming out here. And again, you can have them coming in different directions, and whenever you need to re-squish that brush on the side of your palette, that's going to give you more control over the thickness of these branches. And then when you get down towards this bottom, again, you can kind of just fill it in a little bit more. So we can zoom back out at this point so you can see the execution in a distance again, so you can see it more on a full scale here. And if you ever need to repoint the tops of those trees, just go right ahead and, you know, repoint it. If you need to use your small brush, if you feel like that's going to give you a little bit more control, you can certainly do that. But again, I'm just kind of getting some of these branches on here, getting them to go in various different directions, and that's going to make it look oh so more natural. And down at the bottom, again, these can kind of merge together. And I've got a little one kind of poking out on the side here, so I'm going to get a couple tiny branches just peeking out over here. That gives the audience who's looking at your beautiful painting hanging on the wall something else to look at, and you won't have to put a frame around it if you're painting those edges. So that's going to complete this step. I'm just going to kind of dot in a little bit more here so it's a little bit more diverse, and you can again get it to your visual pleasure, but you want to make sure that that horizon line is nice and jagged. And then we are going to be using the small brush for the next step. So after you get these branches to your liking, you'll put your big brush away in your water cup and take out your small brush in preparation for the next step. All right, so for the next step, we're going to be doing the sun. We're going to use your small brush to do it, the number 1 or number 2 round brush. The colors I'm going to be using are white, yellow, and orange. And the trick to this step is to use very little paint. So as you go along, if you use a little paint, it will continue to dry for you, and you can keep adding layers and adjusting your colors. If you use a lot of paint, it's not going to dry, and then if you don't like it, you're going to just have to wait for it to dry and adjust it later. So if you use just a tiny little bit of paint, I'm going to have a zoom in here. I'm starting with white, and I'm starting with very little bit of paint. The size I'm going for is about the size of a peanut, like a small peanut, maybe on the oval side. I've got mine in a nice dark spot on my canvas. You can put it in the center, you can put it off center, whatever works for you. And I'm just kind of rubbing in that white. It's very dry at this point. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a touch of yellow, and I'm almost going to put it like it's a glow around the bottom edge of that sun. And then the next color that I'm going to add is just a touch of the orange, and again just a touch, so you can see that I'm wiping it off on the side of my palette. I can always add more. It's really tough to take it away once it's there. So now I'm just adding just a touch of the orange, and you can certainly go outside of the sun that you've put on there, because it could potentially get those little low-lying clouds to glow too. So if you want it to be even more creative, you can certainly just rub it out into those clouds along the sides, and that would naturally happen with Mother Nature. So what I'm doing now is I'm just kind of rubbing it in to give a nice full glow to it, and I'm going to add just a touch more white in through here, and I'm not going to overwork it. Once I feel that I've got it accomplished, it's not too bright, it's got a little bit of those sunset colors as a glow, and then that's all I'm going to do for it. It might take you a little bit to kind of work with it, but once you get it, you get it. And then for the next step, you can zoom back out at this point, and then the next step, what we'll be doing is we're going to switch brushes back to the large brush, so you can put your small brush away in your water cup and wash and dry your large brush. All right, so for the next step, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be finishing our trees. We're going to be putting the green into our evergreens. I'm going to be using my bristle brush. I'm going to be using mostly green paint, but I definitely will be going into my black paint as well. So this is going to be a dotting or dabbing technique. So I'm going to be, in essence, picking some areas that I want some brighter green. The vibrancy of these tree tops, which is in essence what we're creating here, will be created by the thickness of this green. The green, as it dries, will get much darker, and where it is thick, it's going to end up being brighter as it dries. So I want varying thicknesses of my green throughout this process. Like I discussed earlier, we're in essence looking down on these trees. So I want there to look like maybe there's some treetops. So what I'll do at some points is maybe I'll make these little triangles. You can use green and black on your brush at the same time as well. So if I want there to be some subtle areas, I just picked up black along with my green. and I'm just kind of dotting in through here. So I do want to maintain some dark areas and some light areas. So as I'm going, like right now I've got mostly black with just a little bit of green on my brush. And I want this to all look like it makes sense and it looks like it belongs together. So I am going to bring a little bit of that green and black up into those back trees. Again, some of my areas will be brighter than others, so I'm going to have more green on my brush. But as you can see, I'm just kind of hopping around the canvas. I'm leaving some of these points up here to look like just they're the tiny tippy tops of some far off trees, and it's more of like just the silhouette of them, so I'm not going too crazy with the bright green paint in through there. And now I'm really just kind of filling in some spots with black and green on my brush at the same time. So that way I do have a nice full second coat all over the canvas, but I definitely have some really light, bright areas and some really dark areas. So I'm just kind of finishing up here with tweaking where I want some light areas and dark areas. And as I go through here, I can modify anything that I want to. And through here, I definitely want to get something on the canvas over here. And again, these lighter spots and darker spots are going to give you the illusion that maybe these are some little treetops off in the distance that we're looking down upon. Maybe get it a little bit brighter down at the bottom of the canvas. That way it looks like we're maybe closer to these trees here. And again, you can just imagine this forest to be as filled or as bright or dark as you can imagine it to be. And again, I'm just dotting and dabbing and kind of every now and again you might see my head go back, so that way I can see it from a little bit more of a distance. So that way I can see if I've got enough diversity in it. If when you're done it all looks the same, then you might want to rethink where you put the light areas and dark areas and just start dabbing in some darker areas, and these little treetops will emerge on their own. And then after you get this step done, we have one more tiny little step that's going to be done with your small brush. So again, I'm just kind of putting in a couple of last tweaks in through here. If you feel like any of your trees are maybe not full enough, this is a great time to just bring a little bit of that green and black and just kind of dot it in here. And you don't need to overdo it. Just, you know, the diversity in those colors is what's going to give the illusion that we're looking down upon this forest from a high vantage point. So let's see here. I think I'm pretty happy with this. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to put my big brush away in my water cup, and I'm going to take out my small brush in preparation for the next step. All right, so the final step that we're going to do, which is the final step on every painting, is we're going to sign it. I usually sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right corner. I'm going to be using my small brush. I'm going to be using a contrasting color. So for me today, I am using white, yellow, and orange, which are my sunset colors. I'm going to be doing it in the bottom right-hand corner. You can do it with your initials. You can do it with the date. You can sign your full name. Whatever works for you, it works for me. This is just your personal identifying mark. So that works well for whatever you would like to do. And that is going to conclude this painting here, which is Mount Greylock at dusk. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you love your painting, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.